and welcome to another adventure with Exploring with Jason. And today we're in a beautiful city, Talmadge, Ohio, at Talmadge Cemetery, where a figure that is lesser known and that is oftentimes forgotten about, a former governor of Ohio, a former U.S. representative of Ohio. He was the governor and others for the Idaho Territory. And he was also he practiced law. And so today we're going to learn about this guy's name is Sidney Edgerton. And like I said, he's no lesser known in the community or here in the U.S. He's lesser known, but also he's often forgotten about. So if you like what you see, share, like, subscribe, and let's take an adventure as we learn the life of Sidney Edgerton. Sidney Edgerton was born on August 17th, 1818, to the parents of Amos and Julia Graham Edgerton. As a child, Edgerton was so sick and frail that burial clothes were being prepared for him. However, thankfully, he didn't have to wear them because he survived. However, but that would not be said about his father, Amos, who suffered from blindness for many years. When his father died, his mother, Julia, was in charge of taking care of him and his siblings. Loved to raise the children on her own. She struggled to maintain her family. When Sidney was 8 years old, he was out of the home and started working himself, where he forced himself through school, where he eventually attended the Guernsey, New York Seminary in Lima, New York, where his cousin taught and where he would be teaching as well as an instructor. In 1844, he moved to Ohio, where he began working for the law office of Rufus P. Spaulding. Edgerton also taught at an academy in Talmadge, Ohio, where within the same year, he studied law and graduated from Cincinnati School in 1845. Within the next year, he was admitted to the bar in Akron, Ohio. Well, during this time, Edgerton declared himself as an agnostic. And on May 18th, 1848, Edgerton or Sidney married Mary Wright. But however, at the time, she did threaten him to not marry due to the fact of his religious beliefs and his views. Sidney was a delegate to the convention that formed in 1848. Then he served as a prosecutor of Summit County. From 1852 to 1856. Later in 1856, he was the first Republican. He was nominated, or he was delegated to the Republican National Convention. And within the same year, he was nominated for probate judge. However, he declined the nomination and was elected as a U.S. In 1858, Edgerton was elected U.S. House of Representatives. And within the following year, in 1959, he began his term as a U.S. Congressman. And with his beliefs as a abolitionist, he knew he was at risk of getting hurt or killed. So with that, he purchased a sword as a form of protection and self-defense. He secretly put the sword inside the walking cane as a form of protection. However, in 1862, he was not re-elected and he did not seek the second term. Edgerton briefly served with the Ohio military and was one of the hunters expert shots from Ohio, and served at the defense of Cincinnati. Edgerton served both the congressman and a soldier at the same time. On March of 1863, he was nominated by President Lincoln to become Chief Justice of the Idaho Territories. Territorial Supreme Court. And he was confirmed by the Senate 4 days later. His salary at that time was to be $2,500 a year, which is about $34,000 as of 2009. With this, he left with his wife, children, niece, Lucia Darling, and his nephew, Wilbur S. Sanders, and his wife and children, and a family friend, Henry Tilden. And also bringing along with them was a young woman named Elmira Greer. Edgerton was his first group to travel to from Cleveland across the Lake Erie, continuing by train to San Joseph, Missouri. Then they traveled by steamboat to Omaha, Nebraska. They both bought their provision and began their trip on the ox-drawn wagon. And had no confrontation with Native Americans. The group stopped the group stopped and visited a town, and then they started off again on their trip to the Idaho Territory. One incident that did happen is when Edgerton fell off from one of the wagons and was almost crushed to death by one of the wheels. Luckily, he survived, and the group arrived at South Pass in August of 1863. After arriving in South Pass, Edgerton received a telegraph message saying that the capital of the Territory of Idaho had yet to be decided. On May 15th, as a group, he was heading west. A man arrived with the telegraph saying that they arrived at, they began traveling on August 15th and was heading west when a man arrived with a telegraph saying that the capital of the Territory of Idaho was to be at Houston. The message was welcoming news to the group, but they knew that they had to get there at Houston before snow, because they knew it was going to be a difficult travel. As the group decided to descend on the western slope, and they discovered that Mary Edgerton was pregnant. And in September, the group arrived at the trail and beginning at the Blackfoot River. Edgerton realized that it would not be possible to make it to Lewistown before the snow. However, the group then changed its course for Bannock. The party then changed course for Bannock, and they crossed the Snake River on a ferry, and on September 6th, after the crossing, they met Sheriff Henry Plummer. And the group continued to cross the Madonna Pass. The group finally arrived to Bannock on September 16, 1863. After arriving, Sidney reported to the territorial governor, William Wallace. Sidney requested the designation of courts and districts. However, there was no court and was delegated for his, and there was no delegation for his district. Wallace appointed one of the farthest and most remote places away from the capital. When he arrived, there was no administration to administer the oath of office. He never took the oath of office, which therefore he was never legally as a Supreme Court officer. But they did buy a home that the sheriff was selling for $400. One room became the first governor's residence. After arriving in his district, he began taking tours of the territory, goldfield and gold camps. While touring, he realized that the value of the goldfield was to the Union. He was chosen by the local population to go to D.C., where his mission was to lobby for the split of the territory of Idaho. Edgerton, Sidney, and Sanders then left in a stagecoach and went to Washington. He arrived in Washington with $2,500 in gold. gold nugget in his pocket, which was about $34,000 in 2009. Numerous members of Congress, or he presented this to the President Abraham Lincoln, at the time Abraham Lincoln, and to many members of Congress. His lobbying paid off. That year, the territory was split into three parts. The territory of Idaho, the territory of Montana, and territory of South Dakota, and territory of Dakota. Idaho territory, which, like I said, it was mostly consist of Idaho territory, the Montana territory, and Dakota territory in 1864. Before leaving for the territory of Idaho, Sidney had private meetings with the president, and in which he asked for a position of territorial governor of Montana. Lincoln said that he would have to think about it. So Sidney left for the territory of Idaho. And unsure if he got the position. As soon as he arrived on May 23rd, 1864, while on his way back, he was not only appointed the new position on May 23rd, Edgerton, or Sidney's wife, Mary, gave birth to the baby girl that they named Idaho, unknowing that the fact that it was now the territory of Montana. After seeing his skills in the territory of Idaho, President Lincoln appointed Edgerton as the first territorial governor of Montana. Lincoln appointed Edgerton on June 22nd, 1864. And at the same time, he found out that he arrived in Bannock. While on his arrival, he was greeted by the capital of Montana territory, and the Edgerton was able to keep their same home. However, there were many people who did not support him, like settlers, miners, in the territory. And the majority were from the border states, either supporting the Confederacy or were Democrats who abhorred radical Republicans like him. There were even death threats for those who flee and there were death threats for those who flew the American flags. However, Sidney put together a quick census so that an election could be held. The election would be for the state council, state house, and for the delegates of the territory of Montana and the House of Representatives. After the elections of 1865, Democrats would take power in the House and took delegate seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, while the Republicans took the council. Numerous engagements and several engagements between governor and Democrats occurred, causing trouble for the Montana legislature. In all, though the legislature worked with Edgerton to pass numerous bills on the roads, public education, irrigation, and mining. In 1865, Edgerton began to have to deal with threats from the Native Americans, so General Patrick Connor was sent to handle this threat. He led an expedition against the Sioux and the Cheyenne Indians, who were disrupting the travelers along the Bozeman Trail. Sidney then issued a proclamation for 500 volunteers to help defend these immigrants. And numerous battles were fought, and numerous of treaties were signed between the governor of the territory of Montana and the Native Americans. In 1865, Sidney was forced to go east to secure funds for the territory. And the revenues began to receive were not enough to pay for the expense, and Sidney himself gave large sums to his own money to the territory in hopes that both to get funds for state and to receive compensation for his expenditures. However, he would receive neither. And in September of 1865, Sidney and his family left the territory. It was also during this time, it was also during this time that Sidney was in Washington, and while he was away, the acting serving governor of Montana, despite being a temporate governor until January 13th, Edgerton never returned. to Montana for 25 years to express their dislike for Edgerton. For Sidney, the state legislature changed its name from Edgerton County to Lewis and Clark County. And after Sidney and his family returned home to Akron, Ohio with his family, Sidney went back and to law practice. He was involved in his law practice until his death on July 19th, 1900. Edgerton is buried here in Talmadge Cemetery. And as we approach his marker, along with his wife, lovely wife Mary, let's take a look at, while we're approaching it, it's back there, so while we're approaching it, let's take a look at some grave markers as we're going along. And so now we're approaching his grave. So what do you guys think about his story? He's lesser known in the community. Actually, he's probably not even thought of, to be honest. So here's the Ray family, and here's Sidney and his wife Mary and his daughter Lucy, and looks like their other daughter, or that's Sidney. Is there two Sidneys? That must have been their son. Because Sidney Edgerton is right there where that flag is. But, yeah, that's the life and story on the life of former Congressman Sidney Edgerton. If you like what you see, well, first of all, thank you for spending the time and coming on an adventure with me. If you like what you see, please like, subscribe, turn your notification on, ring that bell icon, and share it with